Everybody, welcome to a YouTube or Hogville.net YouTube special. We have risen, we have resurrected the huddle with Marty Houston. Marty, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I am doing incredible. I am pumped for this. I can't wait. We get to go and delve into things like you used to with the huddle with Ernie, where we're not talking just about Razorback sports. We're talking about the whole entire landscape of sports. And that's something that I'm excited about because you talk about Razorback sports all the time. The retread, it just sometimes it just gets a little monotonous. And this is what's so great about bringing the huddle back is that we have more variety that we can offer to everybody.
There you go. Absolutely right, and you're right by that. I mean, there's only so much about, and let's be honest, it's mostly Razorback football, and I get it. That's what everybody wants to talk about, but there's only so much of it that you can beat down and talk about and dissect.
So you've been on break for, well, not really break, but you've stepped away from the huddle for 17 years now. What have you been doing in your meantime?
Yeah, I still talk sports. I mean, I get people that and I'm with a television station. I'm close to the sports crew up there. We talk sports. Mike Irwin and I. I mean, we have little sports segments every single day that we get into and talk about. So, but for a living, I'm still in television. I'm just behind the scenes. I'm not in front of the camera like I was.
So, what went into you wanting to bring the huddle back?
You mean when it first started?
No, with what we're doing.
Oh, well, Lanny Beavers, who is the head honcho there at Hogville.net. He and I got talking. He thought it'd be fun. He was around the last year I did the show. I was in Little Rock. I did the show for 11 years, and the last 14 months of it, I was in Little Rock, and that's when I really got to do. This was around 2004, 2005, and it really got to knowing Lanny about then. He was doing play-by-play for Pulaski Academy. The group that I was working with at the time, Equity Broadcasting, they had a radio station in Little Rock. That wasn't, it was kind of almost an afterthought for them. And he needed some help getting his games on. They ended up airing quite a bit of sports on that radio station. And there was a few times that Lanny sat in the studio with me because at that time, in that last 14 months, Ernie Witt Jr. was not with me. That was, he was never he was an employee of the radio station that had carried the show and not an employee of the television station. So when Equity Broadcasting bought the station, he continued to do it. Until they moved that studio for that last 14 months, and he wasn't with me. And so Lanny a few times sat in the studio with me there as we got to knowing each other, and watched me do a few shows, and he just thought it'd be fun that we come back and try to do this on this stream this week.
Yeah. I want to thank Lenny also. He was the one who provided me this opportunity as well. When he presented it, I jumped on it immediately and said, we've got to do this. We have to do this. And it was great seeing you on Saturday last week outside War, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, I think the situation out there, War, between it just being hot and it just didn't. I know the university they moved the game up. They tried to do the best that they could. And, I really feel like if it was a little bit cooler, if it was a different situation, hell, I mean, maybe even a different ball club for that matter. I think that I think that the experience would have been a little bit better. Everybody would have had a little bit more positive attitude towards it.
Well, I mean, I've seen all kinds of situations since the whole debate on if we should play games there or we shouldn't. I mean, the university could have done some things with this particular situation. They could have played a night game. Sam Pittman talked. He said, "Hey, I didn't want my guys getting in late." Well, we've played night games there at Little Rock plenty of times. Even in recent years that we've played them. If your priority is for the health and the safety of the fans and the players, due to the heat, that seemed to be like not the priority when they were talking about. I was thankful that they moved it to noon.
Yeah.
I still, for the first time in my life, suffered heat exhaustion in that stadium, and that's another thing I don't think that people really take into an account. When you're at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, it's situated differently in comparison to the Sun.
Yeah.
There is larger scoreboards. You've got areas of that field, and when you're down there taking photos, you know what I'm talking about. That you'll be in the shade, and there was absolutely no shade at War Memorial. Again, the people are right on top of you. Again, if you're working the sidelines and you work down there on the field, the photo area all of a sudden has shrunk. And to me, that's what makes it a good atmosphere there at War Memorial, is because the fans are right on top of you, and whereas you've got a much larger area, the fans are a little bit further back there at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. So, but I don't think it would have mattered. I've sat there in games where they were, had pouring down rain. I've seen good crowds. I've seen bad crowds there. And I don't think that's going to go away. I don't even know if it's really about the stadiums as much. People will talk about that because War Memorial's an older stadium, but there was complaints about the concession stand area, and that's when I thought I was going to pass out trying to get to there. And I had just been baking in that one end zone for most of the second quarter. And I didn't think I was going to make it. But that concession area is really not any different than what I knew growing up. It wasn't like that they lost control of it. It's always been like that. So I don't think that any of the conditions about driving out of there or the conditions of the stadium are any different than what they have been in the past. So I think that some of it may be just, Northwest Arkansas has grown, and there's some people that want to say, hey, we need to have all the games up here. I mean, to me, if you're a Razorback fan, you're going to go play wherever they're played, So
yeah, and I've heard, here's and there's about what it might be the last that might be the last game, Arkansas versus Arkansas State, and they're in 25, and there's been rumblings that might be the last hurrah. I mean, I know that Arkansas played like Oklahoma State for a year. They played for 20 plus years almost. They played the classic games that you had against LSU there, and those are some memories that a lot of folks still hold with them to this day. I mean, playing Texas down in War Memorial as well. But as time goes on, the nostalgia factor, I feel, elevates, and the realistic expectations, I think, start to shrink. And that's where a lot of folks are, beating that drum saying, hey, we need this thing up in Northwest Arkansas from now on.
It's always about the money. And the reason that, I grew up with games. There were 3 games in Little Rock, 3 games in Fayetteville. And there's no question that the Razorbacks built the statewide brand and their reputation off of having games played in Little Rock. And it worked. Worked for a long time. Like anything that evolves and it gets bigger, as Northwest Arkansas has gotten bigger. In those days, it was hard to get up the old Highway 71 to go to a Razorback game. You had to be And again, they seeded more in Little Rock, and they would schedule the bigger games there at War Memorial. It's easier to get to Northwest Arkansas. The conference, Arkansas is in a big conference. College football has gotten so much bigger that that it's just gotten to that time. And I don't think that it's because the stadium isn't as good, or that people in Little Rock. That's what gets me, is that people start pitting each other. You Little Rock people think you deserve a game, or the people in Little Rock like, well, this is the only game I get to go to. Well, come on now. I mean, everybody will drive to go to a game, and it's a lot easier to make it to these games. But I just think that the scheduling is going to get to the point where it's going to be harder. I think it's going to be harder to schedule that game at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. I think Jerry Jones may figure out, a game here and there, possibly to bring the Razorbacks in. But I just think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be hard. We were talking about this the other day. I think it'd be hard for Oklahoma and Texas maybe to continue that game that they play at the Cotton Bowl. I think it's going to be hard for maybe Florida and Georgia to play that game that they play in Jacksonville. You go to non-conference games, and you got the revenues that are coming in from these home games. I just think it's going to make it a little bit more difficult, and the economics and the situation is going to take care of it. Not that War Memorial can't keep up with, the minimum that they are supposed to do, or the minimum. See, I've heard this suggested that they aren't keeping up with what the requirements are from the SEC to host home games there. I don't think that's going to be the situation. I think it's strictly going to come down to that's just where scheduling is going for the SEC. And that's where it's going. I do think it helps War Memorial financially if they had more Razorback games like they used to, that they would be able to keep it up. And if you remember in the early days, in the late '90s, when they were going back and forth with the proposals, there was a proposal to keep 2 games or 3 games in Little Rock, and they would do X amount of improvements, add X amount of seats to the stadium, and Frank Broyles at the time, he knew he wanted to move the games up there, that it had just evolved to that point.
Yeah, it's so interesting how Frank was, I wouldn't say eager, but he kind of saw the writing on the wall, because him and John Barnhill traveled the state, every inch of it seemed like, trying to drum up business, saying, hey, we're building this Razorback brand because this whole entire state is a Razorback. And for that to now evolve up to Northwest Arkansas. And what's so interesting to me too is that this entire state, we root for the Razorbacks, but we're going to be the first one to bite somebody's neck trying to say, hey, you know what? We're going to take games away from you now.
Yeah. Well, again, everybody there. It used to be done a lot more. Alabama did it. They had a split stadium, not as much as what Arkansas did. Ole Miss played games in Jackson as well as Oxford, and we've hung on to the game. And look, we're talking about one game. Maybe there'll be a situation once every 10 years or 5 years they're able to maybe get a game back over there once in a while. But we're the only ones still trying to hang on to a game that's not on campus and using it for a home game. And it's been good for the Razorbacks, no question about it. Again, they built a statewide brand with those showcase games there in Little Rock. And it's been good for Central Arkansas. It's been good for their economy. And you just know, and I think that people are getting to that realization. Even the people in Central Arkansas, I think, are coming to the realization that the way college football is changing and the way that it's going, that it's going to make it hard. I think that when Hunter Yurachek signed this through 2025, he knew what he was doing. That hey, that's probably, that might be it.
Yep. So I hate to bring an end to this stadium talk because I honestly have enjoyed it. We've already passed 16 minutes and it feels like it's just been a blink. So let's look ahead at Kent State for a little bit. Sam Pittman talked today a little bit about Rocket Sanders hasn't been practicing. He's only been on the sidelines going through reps and workout. I don't know if we're going to really see him this weekend. Rashad DeBinion looks like he could be him or Dominic Johnson are going to be the 1-2 combination that we'll be seeing. I want to see where the offensive line stands. It could be where Sam's going to draw him and Dan Enos are going to draw it up, where Arkansas is going to run that ball 15 times in a row to start the game to push their dominance on that defensive line with Kent State.
Well, he said it after the game that he recognized there were things that they needed to work on in the run game, but he thought the passing game was where it should be. You got to understand this is going to be a critical year for Rocket Sanders too when you're talking about just him, because it's his junior year, and if he looks at jumping to the NFL, he needs to have that kind of a year this season. This is a guy that led the SEC in rushing last year, and so he needs to, or second in the SEC in rushing. He needs to have a big year. You know that he is going to be able, or he wants to play if he can. Whereas in a game like this, if you have a chance to rest him, if you're really concerned about the injury, you're gonna do that. You've got certainly enough running backs to take up the load, and where you could do that. So I think you'll see him play this week. I think it's going to be critical for him without risking anything. So but I think they do want to work on some things that they've talked about with the offensive line and with the run game in general.
I think this is a great opportunity for myself personally, not as a fan, but as a media person wanting to see what Sam does with that offensive line. He has some opportunities on Saturday to mix and match, put some guys in some different places to see if there's a little bit of a mesh him and Cody may not have seen in practice going against a defensive front like Arkansas has on the practice field.
Well, that's Sam Pittman's forte is the offensive line, and he could probably recognize the areas that they needed some work in, and he recognized it after the game this last week. So I think this is where we're in a good situation where we've got Sam Pittman as the head coach, because he is a guy that has worked with some very good offensive linemen and worked some very good offensive lines, and he's going to demand to run the ball. I mean, I think Dan Enos is in there as the offensive coordinator, but Pittman, worked with him too. And, I think that they both recognize that they need to run the ball and that they need to get that part of it right.
Yeah. And that's, we're going to be able to find out and see exactly where that offensive line, the offense as a whole is at 3 p.m. on Saturday on SEC Network. So looking forward to that. So, Marty, let's move over a little bit to some NFL action. So tomorrow night, the Chiefs and the Lions take the field. They kick off the 2023 NFL season. This is a very intriguing game. You have the Kansas City Chiefs coming off of their second Super Bowl over the last couple of years. Travis Kelce is a little bit of a question mark going into the game. He injured himself in practice the first of the week. And you have Jared Goff, which is a huge question mark. Come over from the Lions 2 years ago, really took a little bit of time to kind of find his footing in that offense in Detroit. And there's a lot of people that are starting to rumble a little bit about saying, hey, the Lions may be better than you think this year.
They were getting better if you were paying attention to them last year, especially toward the end. They finished very well. Had that win over the Packers in the last game, knocked the Packers out of the playoffs, and really the Lions didn't have much to play for. Talking about Sam Pittman, there's one of his guys right there, Frank Ragnow, that's on a very good Detroit offensive line. You talk about a team that's going to run the ball. They just brought in a new running back in Gibbs from Alabama, and he's going to be they're going to run the ball, and they've got Amon-St. Brown, who is probably underrated as one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. They've had some things that they've been working on and building towards, and they really think that they may make a push through and maybe push the Vikings in that Central Division this year.
Yeah, really. You look at what the Lions did, like you were talking about just a few minutes ago. They knocked not only the Packers out of the playoffs, they knocked Aaron Rodgers out of the last game as a Packer in a Packer uniform. And that's a huge thing because if you think about it, the Packers have really only had two quarterbacks since 1993, 94, somewhere right around there. And you're looking at 30 plus years, right around 30 years, where you've had that quarterback that you could depend on as a Packer, which they had back in the day with Vince Lombardi. And now they have a lot of question marks. And like you were talking about, with the Lions being able to push the Minnesota Vikings, which I think are a very solid team from top to bottom. They've had a little bit of rotation or a little bit of switching around there. They released one of their defensive tackles, which was a second-round pick from last year's draft. They found some guys that are going to be able to get the job done. They moved on. And you have Patrick Peterson, which has left that secondary with Minnesota too. So there might be an opportunity where Detroit can come in there and maybe sneak a couple of wins in and take the division.
Well, there's a lot more question marks going on with the Chiefs right now. I know they got a lot to play for. We have not had a back-to-back Super Bowl winner since 2004. I know that's crazy, and they've been in 3 Super Bowls and have won 2 of them, but they're a little dinged up. As you talk about, Kelsey is a question mark, may not play, hyperextended his knee this week. You've got Chris Jones, who is holding out. All of a sudden that's taken away from your pass rush. They've got some new guys in there. The receivers that Patrick Mahomes had are not the same ones. A lot of them are not. You're going to have running back by committee. So I think that there's a lot of question mark as they make this push to try to become a back-to-back Super Bowl winner and to get to the Super Bowl 4 times, which I think would be amazing. In the time span that they've had and the kind of team that they have built up. So you got a hungry team like Detroit to come out on a big platform to open the 23 season and show what they have, and you've got a team with some question marks like the Chiefs that are trying to hold on, to what they have built up.
Yeah, everybody, you can catch that game tomorrow night at 7:20 is kickoff on NBC. So we're going to switch to baseball here for just a couple of moments here. We're going to look at the NL Central for just a moment. So it's been a very, very odd year for the NL Central. You have the Cubs, which you didn't think were going to really do too much, and then Cody Bellinger decides that, hey, you know what? Jump on my back. I'm going to carry the team. He's in the running for an MVP. He's in the running for the MVP for the NL. And you have the Milwaukee Brewers, which they've kind of been that staple now for the last 3 or 4 years where they've been consistently at the top. But then you have the Cardinals that they took a huge slide with Carlos Marmol. I know that that's near and dear to Dudley Dawson's heart. And when I've kind of talked about it on his show too, we actually have a running bet right now to see which one happens first, if the Cardinals take the Central or if Marmol gets let go before the end of the season. So there's a lot going on there too.
Well, he's in his second year. I've got more of an issue of why they fired Mike Schild, after they had won the division then. But he won the division last year. Marble did. This has been a very tough year, and it just has not worked out in the pitching. And what's really tough is looking at guys like Sandy Alcantara with Miami and Zach Gallen with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who were in the Cardinals system and that they had traded away, 5 years ago, and are now budding pitchers and could have been helping them. When they traded Gallen and Sandy Alcantara, they traded for a guy that they don't even have anymore, and now they've turned out to be. I look back at some of those trades in 2016 or 2017, 2018 trades that the Cardinals had made, and how that might have been helping. Right now, so they recognize their issues with the pitching. Again, not the kind of year anybody saw coming. Especially a team that just won the division last year, and in last place. They haven't finished in last place since 1982. So it's been a really tough year, and I think they saw they need to get some pitching in. They're back in their coffers. In their minor leagues, and continue to develop them. That's what they did at the trade deadline. They've got a lot of good young arms. We'll see how they develop. And, doggone, I hope, Wainwright, who came back this year, and people are scratching their head about whether he should have or not. And I'm one of them. But I'm hoping he can get a couple more wins before this month's over. That he could leave with that 200 wins. So,
one of the kids in AAA that really intrigues me too is Mason Wynn, kid from Arkansas, Pine Bluff. He's having a great season for the Memphis Cardinals. I wonder if that's something where into the season the season comes to an end for Memphis, and the Cardinals say, hey, you know what, we're going to bring him up, we're going to drop a couple of guys off our roster, we're going to give the kid a chance and see what he can do at the league. Yeah,
he's been called up and doing pretty well. In fact, you're seeing a lot of the young guys that are doing well. Walker and Nolan Gorman had, I think, 3 home runs between the two of them last night. They see where their future is with some of these young guys that are coming up. Mason Wynn is going to be very good for them. And they've been good in that area where their pitching has been depleted and they've needed to build that up. I think they feel very good about where they're going on the positional positions that the positional players that they have on the squad right now. I mean, some good young. I mean, Walker is big. He's a big guy. Hits the ball hard. Very, very good. Georgia kid. Getting to go back and play in his home state this week in their series with the Braves. Nolan Gorman, very good. So I just think that they're giving them some extra time. And Mason Wynn, I'll bet he stays with the club the rest of this season and back into spring training next year with a good shot to making the full time with the club.
Well, Marty, it's about that time, my man. You got to get back into what you were doing real quick. We're gonna close.
I can't believe it. It's been 30 minutes. 30 minutes has gone by already.
Yeah, it just flies by. I'm telling you, it flies by when you're having fun, my man. So, everybody, I want to thank y'all for jumping on for the launch of the Huddle with Marty Houston. I'm your host, Jason Pattyson. I want to thank Marty again. You've been a gracious
yes,
person
sir.
To let me do this with you, and I've had an incredible time so far. Everybody, you will be able to find us every week with Marty, and I want to thank Koi Southern Eats. They're one of our sponsor. Also want to thank Pixabay for the music, and I'll see you next week. Actually, I'll see you on Saturday.
Okay. Yes, I will.
All right, y'all. Take care. Have fun.